Hello, I'm Andrew Kenningham. I'm the Chief Europe Economist for Capital Economics. It's the 5th of August and I'm going to talk you through our week. I'll start with Europe as that's my patch. Now we've seen yet more good data coming out of the European Union this week, particularly the PMIs, which showed that in some cases they were at record levels and suggest the economy is rebounding very strongly. That's continuing a trend which we saw beginning in May as countries began to lift their restrictions. We think that's got quite a lot further to run, and the economy will post another strong growth rate in the third quarter, and that inflation, although it will rise a bit, won't be high enough to cause any real concern to the ECB. Elsewhere in the world, we've been looking at the slowdown in China. Now we think China's slowdown has got further to run. It's being driven by tighter credit conditions, which is slowing the construction sector, and changing patterns of spending in advanced economies as we come out of the pandemic. We don't think this will have a big impact on the world economy as a whole, and we doubt that it will cause concerns about a hard landing of the kind that we saw about China back in 2015. But it will, of course, have big impacts on certain markets, most importantly on industrial metals, because China buys around half the world's industrial metals. That will have direct effects on the commodities market and, of course, on some emerging economies which are very dependent on exporting those metals. Otherwise, in emerging economies, there's an interesting divergence taking place between those which are beginning to tighten policy and those which are still in loosening mode. This week we saw a really good example of that with the central bank in Brazil raising rates by 100 basis points, which is more than people had expected, to just over 5%. Now, inflationary pressures are building in Brazil, and we think the central bank will have to raise rates a good bit further by the end of this year, towards about 7.5%. In contrast, Southeast Asia is really struggling as a result of a surge in the Delta variant. That's particularly a problem for them because their vaccine programs have not really got underway, and a number of them are very dependent on international tourism. So because of that, policy is going to be kept at least as easy as it is. Central banks will not be raising rates, and in some cases, such as Thailand, for example, we think they'll be cutting rates. Now, that's all I've got time for right now. There's a lot more on our website, as I'm sure you're aware, so do have a look at that if you have time. Otherwise, thanks for listening and have a good weekend.